Peace, people. I'm happy to be back with you. It's not a secret that I was born in Southeast Texas, and my mom's family is from Louisiana. At various times in my early life, I've hung my hat in Lake Charles, Shreveport, and New Orleans, so Cajun food's in my DNA. I learned a lot about cooking from a good family friend that's a classically trained Cajun chef, as she makes and often shares with me some amazing seasoning. All this to say that when my mom texted last week and said she had a hankering for gumbo, it was game on. Gumbo's really personal, and a lot of people I love make some really good versions. Sometimes it's seafood with crab and crawfish. A lot of times it's served with potato salad. But by now, folks know that I'm not able to cook with dairy or wheat anymore, which has been a challenge, but one I've embraced. So I'm going to share with you my chicken and sausage gumbo. It's gluten-free, and the ghee counts it as dairy-free in my book. I'm just going to say, if you can use flour and butter, then you probably should do. Now there's some elbow grease that goes into gumbo, but the outcome, is well worth it. My neighbor is a reliable taste tester for me, and he said he's not often moved to tears, but this last batch of gumbo must have gotten him. That's really what it's all about, gumbo, Cher. So first off, I start off with a whole chicken cut up. I save the back and neck for bone broth later. Sometimes when I have time, I fry the chicken. Sometimes I boil it. In this case, I'm going to roast it in the same Dutch oven that I use to make the gumbo. I season it real well with Cajun seasoning on both sides. My friend Christy, she's from Abbeville, Louisiana, down near Lafayette, and she makes this Keystone seasoning, which is absolutely the best. And as I said, I liberally season and then roast the chicken in the oven at about 350 for 30 to 40 minutes. Now while the chicken's roasting, it's a good time to get everything else in its place, mise en place. Dicing the onion and mincing the garlic and cutting the celery and pepper. Really just using the time well to basically get all the veg ready for when it's needed. And you're probably tired of hearing it, but be sure to save all those vegetable ends for broth later on. One of the things that makes gumbo special is the andouille. Find a version you like. There's a few go-tos for me, but this brand from Whole Foods is good and it meets the Derek Kitchen requirements. Read Kim's stamp of approval. Typically, we seek things that are simple as possible. No preservatives or antibiotics. If it's pastured or organic, that's great. Basically, we only eat the happiest hogs. Once the chicken's good and done and has a nice tan, dish it out, set it aside in a bowl or on a plate to let it cool before you skin and debone it. Remember to save that stuff for the bone broth later. Now for what makes gumbo gumbo, the roux. There's lots of ways to do it, but here's what I do. Once the chicken is set aside, I pour off all the juices, about a tablespoon or so, and then add 2 tablespoons of ghee and melt it all together over medium heat. Once melted, I add about a cup of my flour blend. We should sidebar on that at some point, but basically I make my own gluten-free flour blend. You can use flour or gluten-free mix from the store. Depending on how you go, a roux really isn't that hard. It might just take a little bit of trial and error to get the right output. After I add the flour blend to the fat, I keep stirring as the roux browns. The goal is to get to a sort of peanut butter consistency and color. You want to keep it moving so that it doesn't burn. But after a little bit, that magic happens and the roux gets darker. And once it's medium brown and smells amazing, you can stir in the vegetables until they're coated in the roux. Continually stirring, cook the vegetables down for 5 or so minutes until they're tender but not overcooked. Stir in about half of the chicken bone broth and bring it to a boil, and then reduce to a simmer. After a few minutes of simmering, stir in the chicken and the sliced andouille, and then add the remaining bone broth. Pop in some bay leaf and let it simmer. After a few minutes, add 1 or 2 cups of okra. Today I have frozen sliced, but fresh out of the garden is hard to match. Stir it periodically, but let it go for over half an hour or so. The andouille is spiced and it's going to impart the gumbo with that smoke and spice, but also take the chance to season with Cajun seasoning and hot sauce to get the flavor just right. Hot, but not too hot, is what works in the Derrick house, and you can always make it hotter individually, so know your audience. Now at the end of the simmering, or when your natives are getting restless, it's a great time to remove the bay leaf, make the rice, and get ready to serve. I'm going to be honest with you, I'm kind of in love with our Instant Pot. I'll admit it can sometimes be a glorified rice cooker. That's what I'm going to do here today. But the thing is really amazing. From sauteing to pressure cooking, it would even do sous vide if Kim would let me. However you do rice, you feel free to do that, but I'm going to show you how I do it in our Instant Pot. I start with about 2 tablespoons of oil in the bottom of the pot and about 3 cups of dry basmati rice. I stir in 3 cups of water and about a half a teaspoon of salt. Mix it up really good, put on the lid, and use the rice setting. It probably takes about 15 minutes or so, and when the tone tells me it's ready, I have great tasting, nearly perfect rice. So starting with a good scoop of rice in the bowl and ladling on plenty of gumbo, garnish with a few sprinkles of gumbo filet and some green onion, we're all ready to pig out. That's good, Cher. I hope you've picked up a thing or two and that your heart and your belly are filled with spiritual food. Peace be with you.